All of the units are trimmed and ready to assemble into our block. I have all of the unit A's, B's, C's, D, E, F, and G. So they are all ready to go. Remember, this block is assembled in two halves. Both halves are assembled exactly the same way, and then one of them will be rotated around and the two will join to make the full block. So let's first lay out all of our units in their appropriate places for making the full block, just to help you get an idea of how it'll all come together. So all of the A's kind of start like this, and they will shoot out from the center. So I know my screen isn't quite big enough for showing you the entire thing, but I think you'll get the gist pretty easily. After laying out your stars, we can start adding the B units. I mean, really, you can add any of the units you'd like. So B is going to go right next to A like this. So it just continues this line right here, and that's where C will join right there. And then D will join in right here, and the two pinks will make a little point right there. Then E does the same thing on the opposite side, just like that. And F will join in just like that down there. I know I could do it sideways. Some of you are probably saying, hey, why doesn't she just rotate it all sideways? I'd like to keep it oriented as much the way that you'll be making it as possible, so you don't have to twist and turn your brain around. So there we go. And then our F unit will go just like that. You can see how having those grain lines around the outside edges is going to be really important. And then on this side over here, it's exactly the same, except it's kind of upside down, because really we'll be making two halves just like this. Align your B unit just like that down here, and your C will go here. So down at the bottom and at the top, you'll have a C and a G right next to each other. Unit D right here, and E, and then F, and then I know you can't see it, but then the other G goes all the way at the top up there. And this is how we will start our assembly. First, we're going to piece A and B together. So from this point, you can take your A and B, just like this. So this is an A and B, and that's where they will join together. And you have an A and B here that will join together. So we'll piece these together first. Everything else will be joined in order. Doing one thing at a time, especially when you're first starting, helps a lot. So we'll join these first. Additionally, we've got our A unit and D that will get joined, and here's another A and D, and then we'll have these two A's, which will get the pieces F and the two F's joined to those. But we'll start with one thing first. So keeping these stacked like this helps us to keep organized and make sure we keep the units together that are going to be pieced together. So that's kind of another strategy for staying organized as we're working. Before we join Unit B here to Unit A, I want to take a look at the Unit A templates with you so you can see what I did with the labeling inside of the seam allowances. All of the Unit A's are all pieced the same. They all look the same. I labeled them differently to help you keep track of what templates get joined together. For example, on this edge over here on Unit A, okay, you can see here it says join Unit B here. And on Unit B, the corresponding side says join Unit A. So these sides go together. on other unit A's, in the seam allowance on the same side, it'll say join unit G. I did that to help you stay organized and to help you differentiate which templates join each other. It was basically, instead of saying join unit G or unit A here, which I feel like gets confusing. So this just tells you exactly which one to join there. Now, if you don't use this and you just start joining and you ignore that completely, that's completely okay. I don't mind at all. It doesn't really matter as long as you end up piecing everything in the right positions. But this is just to help you out. In addition, on the opposite sides, let's compare the two unit A's again. There is one side that says join unit C and one that says join unit F. There is a third version of unit A, so let's take a look at that, where one side will say join unit D and one side will say join unit E. Again, just a way to help keep it a little bit more organized and labeled more simply for you. So there will be two of each labeled type of the unit A's if you want to pay attention to that and use those sides to help you out. So with right sides together, we are going to join them. I like to do a little glue basting and just draw my fine line of glue on the inside of that seam allowance and then place my piece here. Now, one thing I do a lot on the templates is I'll cut corners off for you to help you with alignment, and I did not do that on these. I could do an update to help you out to join them a little bit more accurately, but for now they'll stay like this until I can squeeze out some time for that. But the one way to do that is to align these two dots on each side, because they should align. So you could take a little straight pin, and while it's glue basted but not heat set, just push the pin through, and if it isn't aligned just centered, like mine wasn't, you can just align it that way and then readjust it. It's a little bit of a fussy thing to do, but it will help to keep that alignment, which is really important for this outside piece because this goes in the corner. So if this piece is misaligned, it could throw off the size of your block. So just keep that in mind and just shift that alignment if necessary and use that pin to go through and align those dots. And then once you have that matched up, then you can set the seam. If you want to, you can use a triangle ruler if you have one handy that has a corner cut off and align it to cut the corner off, or just do your best to eyeball it. The corners should be pretty much the same amount poking out. Let's take a look at that close up. So if you look here, if you look on one side, the corner poking out should be just about the same as this side. So we'll do the same alignment with the second piece A, or unit A and unit B. So again, we'll align them, get them lined up. So I have the correct edges coming together. Just put a little line of glue and then do my best to eyeball that in place, and hopefully I'll get pretty darn close. Check with my pin to see that it goes through the dots. It's pretty darn close. Then heat set that together, and then those two are ready to sew. The dot indicates that there's an intersecting seam. So when you sew with your seam allowance to the inside of your sewing machine, start from the top up here, and then just come straight down to the dot, stop at the dot and backstitch. Alternatively, you can start at the dot if you just flip it over, start at the dot on the other side, backstitch, and then just sew straight down. It's up to you which one you choose to do. Both seams are sewn. Let's take a closer look. So I started at the dot, backstitch a little, and then I came straight down. And just as a sewing tip for you, when you have pieces intersect and there's a little dog ear poking out, generally that seam should come straight through in between the little intersection or the little space where the two units meet right there. So it's just come straight through, not off to the side, and not cutting off a little corner here on that little dog ear. Now, as you're making these, keep your pattern handy because the directions for pressing the seams is in the pattern for you, and it just helps you have a reference so you can press the seams the directions they need to go. On unit AB, the seam gets pressed toward unit A, and you'll notice that unit AF gets pressed toward unit F, and this is going to help all of our seams set and lay nice and flat and work really, really nicely without creating extra bulk, which can happen a lot in paper piecing. So we'll press these seams toward unit A. We'll take out the seam allowance paper on the unit A side. One thing I really like about using this foundation, and I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but it bears mentioning again, is when I tear it out of the seam allowance, it feathers. And some people might think, oh, that's so messy. But it's very soft, it's very thin, and what it actually helps to do is prevent this piece from flipping up. You see how it's still stable? It's not flipping up, and there's no other seam there. So unlike with paper, you get this piece kind of staying put. When you paper piece to regular paper and you tear that out, the paper comes off and it kind of flips back and forth, and it can cause just headaches, for lack of a better word. So we'll press this one toward seam A, or toward unit A. We'll set the seam, and then I like to press it from the front. And what we're looking for here is that this line continues straight and this line continues straight. If they're off put, that means your dots didn't align when you basted or pinned this seam together. And if that happens, that can set off the whole block to where it won't actually piece together properly or won't be the size you want it to be. If it's just a teeny tiny bit off, don't worry about it. Most of that will absorb. But if it's 1/8 of an inch off, I would probably recommend fixing that. I'll leave it up to you if that happens. So again, we'll tear out that seam allowance. I'm not tearing out the other side because it's not really creating too much bulk or issues. So set that seam. You can do it on either side, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to lay it down with the B side down and A up, and then fold A over and then press it to the side. And I'm allowing my iron to sit on it without moving it around too much to let that heat penetrate through, especially with the layers of paper. That's important because the heat has to be able to get through all of those layers. Now we're ready to add on unit C, which is going to go on just like that. Now I do want to point out, I did clip the corners on these, so when you baste them, whether you pin or glue, they should set in, and you don't have to worry about trying to align it and having those corners poke out. So that should work really nicely for you. So I'll just draw a little line of glue here on the inside of my seam allowance. Take out any little linties. There we go. And then when I align that, I am going to align my piece so that the corner lines right up against the edge here, and this clip corner lines right up against the edge of that block. There we go, just like that. And if you want to double check it before heat setting, get your little straight pin, push it straight through, and look at that. That worked. That worked so good. Goes right straight through. That's why cutting those corners is so helpful. So I might fix those other templates for you because it does help and it reduces time that you're messing around with it. Now this little dog ear, it can stay if you want it to, or you can take it off. This seam will get pressed toward seam C, so it doesn't really create extra bulk because we're not pressing this way. So we're not pressing this way with it. It's up to you. It's really not going to cause a problem if you do leave it. So let's do this side. Draw that fine line right along that edge. You don't need much, just enough to hold it. And remember, it'll wash out. Align your clipped corners with right sides together. Double check that placement if you want to. And then heat set it, and then we'll sew that seam. And you can sew straight down to the dot or sew from the dot down. It's up to you. So the seams are sewn. I started at the dot and came straight down. And this seam will get pressed toward unit C, just like this. So I'm going to take out that seam allowance right there between, right there at the edge of C. If your fingers don't really like pulling it out, you could use tweezers. So another little side tip. Do the same on the other one. Okay, here's a good thing to point out, little tip here. See how my sewing got off the line? I was sewing from this side and this shifted and it's just a smidge off the line. And it does make a bit of a difference. See when I press that over how now that corner is off? If that happens to you and it bothers you, go ahead and just take out the seam up to where you started coming off of the line, which if I were doing it, I'd take it out from about here. But what I'm going to do first, well, personally, it's not going to bother me. Some of you might be surprised by that, and here's why it's not going to bother me. This seam here, everything is fine up until here, and this is the outside edge. So because this is the outside edge, and this seam here will be joined to a sashing, this shortage will be absorbed in the sashing. And the other reason why I'm okay with that is since this is correct, when I press this up, this edge will align correctly. So I'll have just this little shortage right about here with this corner being good and this section being good. Now, if this were to have happened down here, I more than likely would fix it because that would make this section off and I still have to join this to another piece. So that's what I'm thinking about when I am deciding to just leave that and not worry about it too much. Also, taking out the paper might allow it to lay a little bit flatter and make up some space to where it's not off nearly as much. So we'll see. Okay. Let's set that seam. And again, this piece, let's take a look at this. I had to take out that seam allowance on piece 1C and 2C. If you were using just paper, or if you did, this paper is probably flipping up, and this paper is probably flipping up with only this to hold them in place. With the foundation feathering right in there, they're still pretty secure, and I don't have to worry about them falling out before I'm sewing them to other parts. So let's set that, press that over, and take a closer look. See, it's still off. I mean, and that's a good amount off. But I'm still going to leave it because my corner here is good and this edge down here is good. I'm going to leave it. And then set that seam, press that over, let the heat penetrate through. And you can see the little bit of difference there because was able to keep it right on the line on both. It's one of the reasons that glue basting is so great. There wasn't the shifting at the machine that caused that. That was probably me aligning it. Sometimes when I'm doing videos, I don't get as close because otherwise my head peeks under, and that's not fun for you. So it's up to you if you fix things like that, but it's nice for you to have some tips and tricks to help you out. Okay, so our unit A, B, C's are done. Next, we'll go ahead and do the same exact process to join the units A with units F. So just keep in mind to pay attention to the letters because they are mirror images of each other. And to pay attention to the edges that they get joined to. These do not get joined to the same edge, side 8, as the other ones do because these are the mirror image. Unit A and F actually get sewn on the opposite sides as these. Pay close attention to what the seams tell you and what to join together because that will help you keep everything oriented properly. If you did join this way, it would be backwards. So this is how these get joined, just like this. So we'll glue baste A and F together along the marked seams, and these will also need to be aligned at the dot to make sure that our corner ends up nice and square. We'll do a little line of glue right down the edge here, just like that. And then align the raw edges, try and get them as straight as possible. Take a peek at them as you need, and then before you heat set, get your little straight pin and push it through. And I'm off just a smidge. Not too much, but you saw before how a little bit off can make a big difference. And it's better to not have to make the decisions to fix something or not fix it. So after I heat set it, I'm just going to double check that my alignment is good at my dots, and it's pretty good. I'm fine with that. It's pretty good. So I'll do the other piece, keeping in mind which edges get joined, and then drawing the glue on there, and then lining that. Hopefully it works. Let's check the dot. That's pretty good. I'm leaving it. I'm okay with that. All right. Oh, I know, the more I fuss with this, the more I think I need to cut those corners off for everybody. Because it makes things just so much easier when you don't have to deal with it. Okay. So I'll sew these and then we'll join that unit G. Templates A and F are all sewn together. I started at that dot again and just sewed all the way down, just like on the A and B units. Now A and F, different from A and B, will press toward F. So keep that in mind as you are working, and keep that pattern handy with those arrows for pressing. So we're going to take that seam allowance out of the F side for both of them. Then we'll set the seam, press to the side, and then we'll join unit G. Now, again, what we're looking for here is that this line continues and that line continues straight across. And I'll just hold my iron on there. Set that seam. All right, and now we're ready for unit G, which will go on just like that. I'll draw that line of glue. And the clipped corners will help you with your alignment, so you don't have to try and center it up. Just get those edges to align along those edges, and then your long seam edges to align up. Heat set that in place, and you can always double check by putting the pin through the little dot. Okay, we'll do the same over here. So again, this goes right here, and you can always double check in the seam allowance. It says you join unit G here. And then align my clip corners. Make sure everything's good. And then heat set that. And it's ready to sew. I'll sew from the dot all the way down, and then we'll remove the seam allowance paper. We'll remove the paper and the seam allowance, and then do our pressing. The seams joining unit G to A and F have been sewn. So we'll press the seam toward unit A and G. So you can see from the back side that we're starting to get the seams going kind of toward this in the same direction. It's very tempting to do this, but what we want to get is the intersecting seams nested and spun to reduce that bulk. So that's going to happen where we have seams with dots. So just stick with me here. I promise it'll work out, and we're going to press that right toward A and F. So we'll pull those seam allowances out. And now in here, you want to pull the paper out that's inside of this area too. So if you have a little pair of tweezers, that can help a lot, 'cause leaving it in there can make it bulky. Or fingernails, whatever works. But we do want to make sure we get that out of there. And then we'll set that seam and pressing it toward AF. And then hold it in place, let that heat go through, especially where we've got some extra bulk. And what we're looking for is that this goes straight along that edge. Then you know you have your alignment worked out really well. Okay, now we are ready to make units A, D, and E come together. So on one of the A's, you'll see the sides where it says join unit D, join unit E. We'll do D first and then E in alphabetical order. So we'll get D ready to go, and D is marked where it joins A. So these will come together just like this. And this one has a clipped corner where it matches, and then the other two corners are pointed, so they match up too. Okay. Get those aligned nicely. You can double check with the point. And we'll do the same for the second. On the side that joins unit D, draw your glue. Where's the join unit A? Hesitating. Okay, and edit that out. Align that clip corner in the point. And the other clip corner aligns on the other side as well. So that helps just double check your alignment. All right, now these are ready to sew. I'm going to start at that dot, come straight down again, and then we'll join unit E. The seams are sewn here, and I've already torn out the seam allowance on the D unit because we are going to press toward unit D for both of these. I'll set that seam. and we are looking for this line to be continuous and straight, and then we'll press it to the side. Oops. Whoops, I got my little triangle off there. If that happens, just give it a little press and it'll fix. And then set the seam there, press toward D. And then we'll add E. Okay, so for adding E, it goes right over here on this other side of A. And this is creating one of the sides of the block. So the white here will be on the outside edge. And on your template, you're going to look for the seam allowance that says join unit AD. So that's where you will join these together, and the two clipped corners will align with the edge of unit A and the edge of unit D there. You'll heat set it, and we'll do the same thing over here. Now be careful with these triangles. It's very easy to not pay attention to what I've marked and say do this, and then that'll put your triangle for that point to be in the wrong place. So keep an eye on those markings on what to align where, so that your design elements will end up in the right spots. Heat set that, and then we'll sew the seam and just keep repeating what we've done already. So as I was just at the machine, I became aware of something I do unintentionally. Well, it's something I do without thinking. I do it with intention, but I don't put a lot of awareness in it. And I wanted to point it out to you just in case it might help you. If you can take a really close look at my seam here, I actually sew just a smidge to the outside of the line. I mean, it's so close to the line you can hardly tell that I did a smidge to the outside of the line. Let's see if you can see it better on this one. And the reason I do that, it gives me a closer to a scant 1/4 of an inch seam when I'm doing paper piecing. Paper piecing can be bulky, and that bulk takes up space within the fabric, which can kind of shrink things in and draw it in and make things smaller. So if you can sew comfortably, for you to feel comfortable with it, just a smidge to the outside of the line toward the seam allowance, that will help alleviate some of that draw that can happen if you sew just right on the line, or too far toward the inside of the block of the line. If you sew toward the inside of that line, toward the inside of that block, you're going to get something like what happened when I was doing this piece here, the A and B joining C, where it's not quite lined up. So giving yourself a little bit of a scant can help you quite a bit to maintain the size of your blocks and have less draw or shrinkage with your blocks for when you're pressing to the side and your threads and everything take up more space. So I hope that is a little helpful to you. We're going to press these seams toward unit A. So I'm going to take out that allowance and set the seam, and we'll press toward unit A. And now we're going to start bringing our units together to create our full block. Now some of this I'm going to pull a little bit more out of here. Set that seam and press toward unit A. Okay, now let's take a look at how these are going to come together. We've got our A's, D's, and E's on the sides, A, B, C up at the top, and down at the bottom, because we're making 2 halves, and remember this one is actually just like this. We just are rotating it around. Okay, so that's going to come like that, and then A, F, G, and another A, F, G, and look at that, that's coming together really nice. The first 2 we're going to join are A, B, C, and A, D, E. These get joined, and these will be joined, and then we'll join these A, F, G units to those momentarily. So these will join just right along here. And we'll just draw a line of glue. It doesn't matter which side you join. They kind of all will work out. And the points will align, and then the clipped corner here will align, which will help a lot with the placement. In addition, this whole long line will align. So if this seam is just right on top of each other, you'll be set. And then aligning these edges at that clipped corner. And this is my favorite part that aligns, is this intersecting seam right here, because we pressed this unit B toward A, and on the other side we pressed it toward D. That's going to allow this seam to nest, and you can feel it. It's so nice and flat, and that should nest really nicely, and then we're going to have an intersecting seam that will spin right there. Now, when we sew this piece, I'm going to start at the dot and come straight down. There is a dot here. We've already worked with that dot, so you just sew straight through it, all the way to the end here. Let's join these 2. I'm so excited. I can't wait for this to come together. And you get to see how those seams work. Not all paper piecing can be like this. There are blocks that there's just not intersecting seams, or the design doesn't lend itself for doing for aligning and spinning seams. But when you can, it just makes things look, just lay flatter, and it alleviates all that bulk that paper piecing gets a bad rap for. So this is our intersection. It's nice and flat, and our corner here aligns with each other, and our points align, and our edges out there align. You'll heat set it, and then we'll sew it and press it, and we get to see that seam intersect and spin next. After sewing both of the seams here, I tore the papers out of the seam allowances on both sides. You don't have to, but for this part, I felt like it would just be easier. It would alleviate bulk, and it really is going to help you see this intersecting seam spin even easier. So let's go ahead and set that seam, and right here at that intersection, we will open that up, kind of like we've done before, to allow the seam to spin. So, and similar to previous seams, we have them going in a pinwheel. So this seam is going up, which means this one needs to go over, down, and then this one will go over. And when that happens, the seam right here will nest and spin. So let's get a good close-up. You see how that is? It looks like this is just pressed over and that's just pressed over, almost like it's an open seam, but that's just because of the color. So if you can take a close look at the seam, see here how there's the one piece, and then this is another fabric piece, and then one here, and then this one is folded back. So you can see those 4 intersect and spin right there. That's a little bit better light. Yeah, almost like tumbling blocks or something. And then from the front, I'm going to help press these over into the opposite sides. You can also press that little intersection down from the back, and then press and hold it from the front. If you rub on the front side of those seams, you might get a shiny spot, so you can use a pressing cloth or pressing sheet for that. And we also have the first one of our little stars here come together so nicely. Oh, I love it. Let's do the second one. We'll set that seam again. And from the back, this seam is going up. The intersecting seam will go to my left. This is coming down, and this one will go to the right. So right here is where our intersection will happen. And we'll just release any glue that might be in there. Move that thread out of the way so you can see it really good. You see that? There. Ooh, that's a good one. That is what I'm talking about right there. You can see all the seams nest and spin right there. All right, so let's press that. It's like one of those oddly satisfying videos my kids are watching these days with cake decorating and all of those. I get the same feeling when I get my intersecting seams to come together, and wait till we get all 6 of these. Oh, it's all over with then. Then I can just be done for the day and be happy. So we'll make sure that that is pressed nice and flat. Next, we're going to join AFG with the previous chunk that we've made of our block. And to do that, we'll just simply align these here. And when we align them, since I did not have this corner clipped off to match that way, and updated templates do have the corner here clipped off that you can align, the part to align is that seam right there. You can align from the center out, getting that seam lined up, and making sure that these little guys line up as well, and then it will match up really nicely. So I'll just put that glue on there all the way down to the edge, and then I'm going to start here at this intersecting seam and get that nested and lined up, and then come down here. I'm going to align the seams here and kind of do that roll method I did in previous videos, where I kind of pull it up and roll it down, and then set that here. And I'm going to heat set that part because I know it matches. I don't want it to shift. Then I'll come to this side, and they should just land right on top of each other. These don't nest. We didn't press these in opposite directions because the design doesn't allow that to happen. That is ready. And I'll start sewing from here and come on down, and then the center intersection will spin when we join our halves, and this one will spin next as well. Now, one little trick that I'm going to show, I have not shown this before, but when we've got seams, a whole bunch of them, more than 4, so 6, 8, 9, anything more than 4, when I have another unit joined here and I'm going to start sewing from the dot and come on down, on the back side I'm going to hold that seam allowance out of the way, put my needle in here, back stitch a couple of stitches, then come down to the end, and that will leave this unhooked so it can spin much more easily when we join the halves together. So that is a little extra trick to take your seam spinning to a new level, I guess. And if you forget to do it, and honestly I forget to do it too, don't worry, everything will still work out, but try and give it a go. See how it works for you. Let's join these two together. So this one will go just like that. Start at that intersecting seam, get it to nest and align, and then from there align the spire to the end and align that edge. edge. And once that's done, I'm going to heat set it. And then I'll get this one aligned. And it looks pretty good. So I'll heat set that side. And now we're ready to sew. And after these two seams, one more seam and the whole thing's finished. Again, I tore the paper out of the seam allowances after I stitched each of the seams. These seams will be pressed similarly to the other side that we just did. For what I mean by that is these two seams up here for A and F, this one is going to the left, this one is coming down, so this one here is going to go up and this one will come down, which will allow this intersection to open up. You might need to release some glue, but just like the other one. And you can see the, oh, that's nice. You can see that working there. And then I'll press that intersection, and then from the front, I'm going to press to the side, going both directions. So I kind of bring my iron down and this one up to go in the direction that the seams need to go. You can see here this middle is spinning in, will end up spinning in a pinwheel, which allows that center to intersect and spin too. All right, let's do the other side. Set that seam and work on that intersection. Just releasing any glue that might be in there, and it's so nice. All right. Press that right there. And then from this side, we'll press over to the side on both parts of the seam. So you can see they go in opposite directions. And just double check that these are all going in the way I want them to, because now we have both halves done. So one of them is going to flip all the way around, and this is how it's going to come together and join. And of course these two seams will come together right here, and we'll have our finished block done and ready. So just do your line of glue toward the inside of the seam allowance all the way down through the intersection. Oh, before I move on, I want to show you what that one part looks like. Remember how I mentioned when joining this to kind of hold that corner back and stitch through, and you can see here how it's loose now. Had I just sewn, it would have been stitched down right here. So now it's loose, and that's just going to help with the final seam intersection coming together. So from the center out, find your intersecting seams and kind of nest them together, and you'll kind of feel them too. But what I like to show here is the 2 points. See the 2 points there? They need to bump up right next to each other, and then you go out to the edges from there. And what should happen is this intersection will nest and this intersection will nest, and then it'll all be aligned really nicely right along that straight edge. So let's just double check, make sure you're happy with it. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, I'm going to heat set it. Now another trick for aligning these, making sure it's nice and square, is aligning this outside edge together. So if this was off for some reason, using the outside edge to help you realign it can help quite a bit. If you notice that it's off a lot here, but you've gotten it perfectly straight here, double check, because if this is off in its alignment, see how my pieces just land right on top of each other? Once you piece this, the whole thing will be skewed. So it's really important to also make sure that these are squared up. That way when this is pieced and you open it up, it will be square. That can help quite a bit with misalignment for the outside edge of the block. Because if anything is off a little bit here, it's going to be absorbed in the seam allowance and won't make much of a difference at all. Okay. Now to sew the final seam, just from end to end, and go right through that intersection as well. The final seam is sewn. I tore out all the papers out of the seam allowance on both sides. And next let's set the seam. And we have 3 intersections to work with. I'm going to turn this way so you can see it better, even though it's sideways. We have one here, and one here. So I'm going to leave this for last because, well, it's so exciting. I can't wait to show you. So we'll just open this up like you did the other ones. And same with this one. Just open it up so the intersection is showing there. And then, hold on, let me open it, sorry. All right, now here in the middle, we've got our seams going around in a pinwheel. So this goes this way, this comes down, which means the seam on that side is going to come down. And then this one's going to go up, which means the intersection there is going to go up. And there is going to be a little place. So what you're going to see at first, because of the gluing, I'll give it a little press so you can see it flatter. Because of the gluing, you're going to see this. We're going to release the glue. There's a little bit of glue right here and right here. Okay, so we're going to release the glue. So that part of the seam goes to the side. And then this little part goes the other side. Okay, so that's really important. If yours isn't looking like a cute little flower in the middle, then that's probably why. You just didn't release the glue. So I pressed that in the middle. Oh, look at, isn't that, oh, I love it. So good. Love it, love it, love it. So that's pressed. Let's press this intersection up here to get it to lay nice and flat. This intersection up here or down here, whichever way you're looking at it. And then from the front, we're going to keep the seams going in those directions. Make sure they are. Yep. And yes, yes, yes! Oh, look at that. Oh, how fantastic. Oh, I love it. Yay! This is a challenging block. And I am so excited that it all came together. I hope yours comes together just as nicely. Please be kind to yourself. Don't compare your first try with somebody else's 100th or 1000th try at paper piecing or any skill that you're still practicing and getting better at. Remember that if you have a mistake that you are not happy with, it is completely okay to fix it and to stop and fix it before moving on to the next step. If you're okay with a mistake, like that little one I had, then that's okay too. It's all up to you. This is your block, and this is actually, here's the orientation of it, the proper orientation, with our A's here in the middle, and B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then B, C, D, E, F, and G, all ready and